Pat, you're always smiling
Well,
whenever we go live.
I try to bring a positive attitude into, as you would call it, the call.
The call, yeah. This is what Pat does, right? There's a countdown, and then Pat's all of a sudden does the, kind of
Well,
does the smile, so he
right.
comes on smiling.
I've been thinking about that recently since, we're all in the world of doing live video casts now. So we've all become kind of like
Yes.
pundits, video pundits, so to speak. But occasionally when I watch CNN and I watch, how they hold the two or three talking heads there, and I watch the professionalism of some of the anchors when they stand there and they have that perfect, they just
Yeah,
kind of hold that perfection. I'm like, they want to take a drink of water, they want to scratch an itch,
that's
they just like
true.
they totally hold that like perfect head. Anyway, it's funny.
I've watched myself on replay, and I bob my head too much. I'm thinking I could never do what they do on CNN. That
Yeah, just hold it.
I'm going to
There
try
you
it
go.
today.
Exactly.
Anyway,
So
welcome
that's what I do.
everybody.
So
Yeah,
I'm practicing.
that's right for our Jake Tapper interview.
Who knows?
Who knows? You never know. Welcome everyone to Radical Ready Live. And I'm just seeing there's to our wonderful community, a lot of new faces. So I'm Dan Riley, and this is Pat Riley. I always say my older and wiser brother. Who, Pat? I gave you some crap last week about needing to get your hair cut, and you did.
I took it seriously.
You took it seriously. I have amazing influence.
Took it to heart.
What
Yeah,
exactly did you do? Did they he
well, I
just
got a
kind of trim the
haircut.
side?
Yeah, sides and kind of the thing I do.
Yeah, the thing you do when you go to get a haircut.
Yeah.
Um, so this is what we do, everybody. For those new, we just chat about, um, you know, interviewing styles, haircuts, things like that. Um, so I am really excited about today, Pat, where we have Lexy Martin joining us in a little bit. And she is, I'll let her speak for herself, but she is just a fascinating woman who's had a long, incredible career in technology, HR, people analytics. Um, and I'm so excited to talk about people analytics, but not just the fluffy side of it, but really the data, the ROI of if we get it right, if we get the technology right, if we get the processes right, what is actually the financial impact? And she's going to walk us through this. So this is serious today. We're going to learn we can actually drive business performance if we do this stuff right. Imagine that. Um, so I'm really excited about that. So we'll talk about that in a moment, and we will bring Ian RADICL on CNN. Yes, Ian, we're working on it. I'm actually connected to Chris Cuomo in LinkedIn. I've tagged him on one of our Radical Ready Live, and he never shows up. I don't know why.
Keep trying.
We'll try. Ian, if we do one, maybe he'll pay more attention to Vizier
Yeah.
if we get you guys and us, and then we'll tag Chris. So, Pat, I was thinking, we're also going to be talking about just there's an interesting report. Let's just call it that, and an unfortunate report actually that Vizier just put out, really about racial gaps, pay gaps amongst black people. And I'm going to let Lexy walk us through that. But, I was thinking about Tuscaloosa, the movie that we both produced and been working on over the past 3 or 4 years. And I know that's still we've been playing in festivals. And just before we dive in, can you give us a little update on how that's doing? That movie is so powerful. The purpose of making that movie and the statements that we made were really intentional. So just let's give our listening audience the community a little update on what's going on there.
Yeah, and to kind of jump to where we're going, you talked about the kind of the ROI of people analytics, Dan, and how that can really affect business. But the other part of this is the story, the real story that we can cull and learn from information. Data in the case of what we're going to talking about with Lexy. But there's also the way we kind of understand. I can only describe it as persistent problems and challenges in society. And filmmaking, the power of story, is one of those vehicles that can help 100 people sitting in a room together in a cinema having a shared experience and holding that moment together. And so to talk about Tuscaloosa, It's a film, like you said, Dan, that we came out last year, March of 2020, and we were playing film festivals leading up to that, and we're continuing to play film festivals. And we actually decided to continue to do festivals, even though you can watch the film now on Amazon Prime and Vudu, and a bunch of Tubi and a bunch of other platforms. We wanted to continue to put it into the festival circuit so that we could drive the discourse and conversation around this. So we were at the Sedona International Film Festival just a couple of weeks ago, which is a pretty prestigious festival. And, I think it played 2 or 3 times, full house. And, and we played some other festivals. We played a festival in Pennsylvania. We played another festival I think it was the East Lansing Film Festival, maybe 3 weeks ago as well. Anyway, what I've been hearing from the film festival programmers, I haven't been able to go to any of those three, but our director, Phil Harder, was down in Arizona. It drives intense conversations. Tuscaloosa is about, kind of the persistent, racial inequities that existed in 1972 in Alabama. And we brought sort of a modern lens to that, telling the story today. But, sadly, these are still some of the challenges that we have. And the power of filmmaking, and we're so proud of Tuscaloosa, is as hard as that story is, it does force us to have to hold that reality and have those hard conversations.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring that up because, a big part of what we're going to talk about today is how do we shine light on truth and start to normalize these conversations. This report that Lexy will talk about in a little bit, we can change the course of this, right? But it takes action. It takes action and not just hope. I mean, hope, we need hope. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah,
but ultimately it takes action. And, this film is driving conversations that we need to be having. So I think that's, I'm really happy that it's continuing. Well, number one, it's great. It's actually in theaters now. People are actually going to sit in cinemas, which was always the hope too, because that does drive different types of conversation versus alone in your living room streaming it, but actually being out talking about it after the film. So it's really a powerful thing. So I think today I also want to I'll give a quick intro to Lexy. She works at Visier, which we brought up, and Visier is just had some really exciting news, and we want to publicly just congratulate them. We think they're an awesome company. That's without saying. But they also just had a Series D round of funding, and really starting to explode and prove themselves as the leader in people analytics. And so we're really honored. We have a few people from Visier out in the community right now. We have Ian Cook, who's been on our show before, and Lexy. We can't wait to bring her live in a moment. But Pat, what are your thoughts on that? I know we were super psyched to hear the news a few weeks ago.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's incredibly exciting for all the reasons you said, and it's just to kind of geek out on the broader kind of HCM world. I mean, this is just more of a testament to how important people analytics is, how it's being valued certainly by the investment community, and just the incredible hard work that Visier and the team has done to just build a great product, build adoption, maintain those client relationships, and continue to innovate. And Dan, I think back. 5-6 years ago when we would be at the HR technology conference, and that's probably one of the first few times we ran into Ian and would kind of geek out looking at the platform, and we were just, oh man, this is just great. So it's also no surprise because I think they just got it right on so many different levels, and we're proud to be a partner of Visier as well, helping continuing to get them, bringing value to clients and to the market. So. And it's just, again, it's a testament to how important HCM is as a category. You've got investors like Goldman Sachs stepping in. They're the lead investor in this round. Yeah. I think it just gives evidence to the work we do, and in particular, the amazing work that Visier and the team are doing.
Yeah, and the power of storytelling, right? I mean, that's ultimately, when I think about, at the end of the day, it's not just, data is, for the most part, it's quantitative and qualitative numbers, but at the end of the day, it should tell you a story, and it should reinforce things that you already know, or bring up surprises that you didn't know, and place it into a story so you can actually introduce change. And that's
Right.
what I love about how Visier works. And a little just a fun statement. When we first became aware of Visier, it was always the conversation of how do you pronounce it? Do you remember,
Oh
Pat?
yeah.
It
Oh yeah.
was, is it French?
Vizier.
Is it Visier?
I was
Visier.
convinced it was
Yes, you were.
Vizier. I was
Yeah, in the
convinced.
very beginning, I think when we first were like, oh, it's got to be Visier. And so let's see, Visier, that's Ian, that, and
Yes,
Lexi,
like
that's correct,
busier.
right?
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe we should just bring back Visier, see
Yeah.
what happens.
Well, they could start a wine line or maybe a beer, a beer label called. It could be the same thing but pronounced differently.
And speaking of beer, we're getting ready to talk about beer
Oh yeah.
and in a moment. So I think we're just going to bring Lexi
I
on
think so. I think
because
so
I
too.
can't, yeah, we have so much to talk about. So Lexi, I am sending you an invite. It's on the way. We'll see Lexi in a moment. Yeah, so we have some beer questions that we need answered. Pat's been doing some research.
I just got questions, Dan. I'm
Oh,
just
that's
like
right.
a
You just have questions.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm just like a neophyte wandering in the desert. I need to learn more about beer, and I think we may have the perfect expert to help us. Hi, nice to,
Yes.
nice to meet you.
I
Hey,
really
Lexi.
love IPAs. It's like the best beer.
So,
So Pat,
go,
here's your
so I've got.
question. We have
So
a
here's the
very,
question,
very,
Lexi, and we're going to be fast friends quickly, I'm sure. So I've been, I love beer, um, and I'm more of in general, more of kind of a pilsner. We drink almost all microbreweries, here in our neighborhood in Northeast Minneapolis.
Wussy.
Yeah, woodsy, exactly.
Wussy.
Oh, wussy. I thought you
wussy.
said woodsy. Woodsy. I thought
That's
woodsy
what.
was like a
Once
was
again,
a
Pat's in the
description
middle,
of a
getting
pilsner.
crushed.
I know this always happens to me. But here's the question. So I've had plenty of IPAs and plenty of EPAs through the years. Um, can you tell me what the difference is between an extra pale ale and an India pale ale? Like
Flavor.
just flavor? I mean,
Yeah,
is
well,
that it?
flavor and alcohol level, I think. And for me, the IPAs just have such great flavor.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty snobbish about what I like. I like the ones that are citrusy.
Oh yeah.
And I live in California, and I live in a place where there are breweries everywhere. So, I have my pick of really good beers. And it's not that I drink a lot. Like, I drink a half a beer a day,
Yeah.
maybe at best. But I just really like good IPAs.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We're gonna stop talking about this. People are gonna think of me and beer as the same.
Oh no, you're just gonna make more and more fans, Lexi. That's.
Yeah.
So Lexi, we didn't officially give your title, but you lead research and customer value at Visier. Give us a little bit of summary of who you are and your history for our community who might not know you. I'm guessing most people do, but just in case, little background.
I'm seeing the pronunciations of Vizier. Yeah, I'm a really long-term time research person. I've been in the workforce 54 years. I'm 76, soon to be 77. And I kind of bring that up because it colors my view of the world today.
Yeah.
But my background is I've always been in tech. I started as a programmer back in the late 60s. And for probably the first 20 years of my professional career, I was the only woman in my role. And I actually didn't think anything of it at the time. I just kind of did my work. But I became a researcher in the early 80s at SRI, Stanford Research Institute. I worked at the Institute for the Future. I'm, been on my own a little bit, and I joined the Hunter Group back in the mid 90s and started this, what has become the Sierra Cedar, now called Sapient Insights HR System Survey. So I think what I'm best known as probably is this, kind of long-term survey that I ran on the value of HR technologies, like on the adoption of HR technologies, and then the value that adoption gives to the adopting organizations.
Wow. Yeah, and then you said when you came to Visier, I think you told me 6 years ago, it was really you were just hungry to keep working. right? I mean, you just
Well,
like you couldn't stay away.
yeah, yeah. So I retired the first time at 70, and I wasn't very successful at it. And I took a year off, and I did some things that I wanted to do personally with my family and my community. And I had always had this card on my desk, and it's Dave Weisbeck's card, and it's a cube, and I had met the Vizier people, I guess, about 8 or 9 years ago, and I was so impressed with that technology. And so I picked up his card one day, called him, and said, I'm not being very successful at retiring. I'd like to work about 15 hours a week, and do you have anything for me? And he kind of hired me on the spot, almost.
Good for him. Good
and,
choice.
and his comment was, yeah, but I want more time. So of course I've given him more time and the company more time. But you asked me something else. The reason I picked up that card is because all the years of running the survey, the one technology out of all the 35 different categories of technologies that we tracked, that if you correlated it with the financial performance of the adopting companies, people analytics, or it was called workforce analytics at the time, those companies that adopted that outperformed everybody else. So just a straight correlation. Like, if you have people analytics, you're doing better than any other organization. So when I thought about coming back to work, both because I'd had this card on my desk and because, the data was just telling me that the place to be was people analytics, that's why I contacted Vizier.
Well, that's a great segue into really kind of let's as you put it, Lexi, let's geek out for a little bit about this. So to kind of put it in perspective, we know, especially over the last 16, 18 months, the importance of a people first approach, the importance of empathy, listening, and listening in ways we haven't before, right? I mean, really trying to listen with authenticity, with intention, with focus, updating, evaluating our purpose and our values in the organization, reimagining process, all these things, if we get them right. So if we have a people analytics strategy that's working, if we have the appropriate technologies that are actually doing their job, not just glitzy, but actually adding value, right? And we have adopted people processes and organizational and operational processes that are highly functional. Obviously, it's the right thing to do. We want to be doing this for our people, but there is an absolute linkage to business performance and financial results. And I would love to hear from you about what that is and what kind of research you've done on that. Because if anyone's wondering, should we do this, there are dollar figures associated to this.
Yeah. I mean, like, just the straight correlations. Organizations that have people analytics outperform on return on equity and revenue per employee. Just, you can see the data. And it's not just, Sierra Cedar or Vizier that has reported this. It's coming from the likes of Burson and Corporate Leadership Council and others. That's just a correlation, though. I used to speak at the HR Technology Conference, and somebody said, well, that's just correlation. What's the cause? So I learned through partnering with an academic, Janet Marler, that there's actually a causal relationship between the adoption of people analytics and a set of practices and improved financial performance. And actually, if you improve the practice, if you do more of the practices, it actually predicts higher financial performance. So that's kind of a wow thing. We've written about it in this book, and the whole methodology on how we've done it, which we've done twice and we're going to do again this year. We've continued to show that this is the case. It's the technology with some practices, and the practices are things obviously like the technology. Technology helps. It's a catalyst for change, though, too. And the other things that help are applying it in thoughtful ways, using change management in thoughtful ways. And probably one of the biggest factors is the giving of it to managers so that it gets used pervasively in the organization. You know, we call it democratization. And, you know, we've got a number of customers with 3,000, 8,000 managers that are using it. And, you know, they're using it to value. You know, it may be a single little thing that they're doing, like, you know, a pay evaluation or something, or, you know, should I promote this person, or, you know, what kind of career path should I support this person on? But the things that they're doing is actually having great impact in the organization, and it counts up.
Yeah.
Counts up.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Lexi. It's so helpful to think of it that way. And as you were talking, I was thinking through sort of the chicken and egg with this, I imagine, with some organizations, which is those organizations that are investing in people analytics and then finding a way to get the right information to management the way you described it, are probably also the organizations that are organized enough with their data and maybe organized enough with a lot of the other things they do, you know, in terms of policies, procedures, that by the time they get to people analytics, they're probably already a better run organization. You know what I mean? So the question I have for you is, and maybe this is where to frame it in a more helpful way, which is it just about having people analytics, or is it about having just having a really well-defined strategy and process where all of this works? Meaning, if I've got a terribly run business, but I bring in people analytics, is it going to make me more profitable? Or is there a lot more that needs to happen to make this really work when I get this information in front of me?
Yeah. You know, I've tracked technology adoption for a really long time. And back in 2006, 2007, I created an investment portfolio of the organizations that had a set of technologies. And I watched them for a couple of years. And those that had people analytics outperformed. And if I'd invested in them, I'd be very rich. And, you know, but the other thing that I've done is I've watched these organizations, and I actually think, and I know this because the research says it, but it's not just the technologies, it's that set of practices that goes around it. You know, and we're going to speak on diversity, equity, and inclusion in a few moments. But, you know, the companies that I watch, they are doing leading practices in all kinds of areas. They're adopting people analytics. They have enterprise-wide change management. They spread the use of people analytics very broadly. They have really good policies and practices around diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're probably focused on things like employee wellness. It's like they have a mindset, a mentality to adopt practices that have value. And you know, I noticed this first in the diversity area. There was a Catalyst report back in 2004 that organizations that had more women at the top outperformed. And that's when some of our customers actually started to pay attention to getting more women into management. You know, so like there's people in these companies with a future-oriented mindset that makes them adopt practices that are going to make them good. So that was a long way of answering the question. But, you know, it's not just the technology, it's that mindset and all the practices that organizations do.
Yeah, and then people analytics becomes that essential tool to kind of keep reinforcing that, right? Because then you create the right kind of virtuous feedback loop.
It shines a light on, you know, reality, and, you know, you can move from there.
Yeah.
Well, and it's the stories, right? And that data that people analytics will tell you. And I think one question we had Al Adamson on a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about a little bit around employee experience and people analytics, and you know, the thought is, well, what data should we use in an analytics strategy? And not all data are created equal, as we know. And you know, we came to the conclusion in conversation that if you think about employee experience, employees don't segment what's happening whether that's a good or bad experience. Like if it's a hiring manager who's having a hard time during a talent acquisition process, they don't self-categorize that in their head. It's just a bad experience or a good experience, right? If it's something to do with leadership development, if it's something to do with engagement, if it's something to do with an exiting employee, whatever it might be, this is just data that's linked to the employee experience. And if we tell this story effectively, that will help us ultimately change process, right? Once we learn, once we get predictive models created, that helps us change behaviors. If we change behaviors, process can evolve. If process evolves, then culture becomes ultimately better. So, what's your advice typically for organizations around, we want to reimagine our people analytics strategy? Where do we start, right? And how do we tear down processes, or say this process is good, this isn't, this data is good, this isn't? What's your recommendation? It's a big question.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's easier if you kind of apply it to a particular area. So if you take the topic of improving diversity, equity, and inclusion, you need the numbers to see kind of where you are. What's your baseline?
Yeah.
And then ideally, you have an opportunity to compare yourself to benchmarks. So are you at the aggregate, are you good or not? But more importantly, do you have the opportunity to kind of make it, take a granular look at where you are? Like, is it division X that maybe has got really great, diversity numbers, and another that doesn't? So then you can start to focus in on that area, and then you can start to look at different processes, like, is our hiring, are we hiring diverse candidates? So we can look at the candidate, the talent acquisition funnel. Does the top of it, are we getting as many women as men? If you look down, the various processes that are in that hiring funnel, are women dropping out more frequently at the interview stage? And then you can kind of take a look at, well, what's happening with the interview panel? Is there a woman on it? And you can start to then pay attention to what's happening at a fairly granular level. That's just in the attract area. You can also look in the develop area, promotions, performance reviews. Are performance reviews equitable, or is there some bias in one area of the company over another? A particular role. And the same thing with retaining people. Is turnover, higher or lower in a particular role or a place? So it's kind of about, having people analytics and being able to look for choke points. That's what Mercer calls it, places in these processes where things are breaking down. And then there's a whole lot of more stuff, you also need to share these numbers internally, at least, and externally, ideally. Kind of hold yourself accountable for where your organization is, and then monitor over time.
Yeah, but I think that's a big part of it, Lexy, the way you describe it, is that accountability. Because if you're an organization that is maybe a little lower on the maturity curve with people analytics, and a CEO says, all right, we're going to commit to this, we're going to start to use this kind of data to run the business better, to make this a better world for our employees. But then you own what you're going to learn, right? Like you said. So there's that. Where are we? How does that compare to benchmark? And then what are we going to do? Whether that's good or bad, And but as an organization, you got to own it.
Yeah, it's been interesting for Vizier to, kind of eat our own dog food, or drink our own champagne or whatever, and
IPA.
And many of us like IPAs, let me tell you. Vancouver, which is where we're headquartered, has a lot of good breweries too. Where was I? So we use it.
Keep tripping you up at the beer stuff.
We should just do a complete podcast on beers. We'll set that one up. And
then we use our software to shine a light on where we are.
Right.
And we're a tech company. Tech companies are not as good as other industries, but we're better than others in Vancouver. So that's cool. And then, we've kind of shone a light on, many aspects of diversity, and we know where we need to focus our attention. I'm not sure I should share this, so maybe I'll stop there. But, but by being able to look, granularly at where we are, we know the actions we need to take to improve our diversity and our inclusion and pay equity. We do a great job on pay equity already. And you really need to have Paul Rubenstein on this show, because he enlightened CHROs around. And because he has such a great tool set, he really knows his stuff.
He's great. And talk about Pat and I, as we were ripping in the beginning about that interview stare. Paul has that down. Paul is he won't bob his head. He's got the eye of the tiger.
Laser focus.
Yeah. Well, that's
for those of you who don't know, that's Paul. Yeah, no, it's when we first met him 5 years ago, because Ann had acquired our company. So Paul was such a pleasant guy. He was just great. Made us feel like family.
Yeah,
I've known him into Ann. So
I've known him 10 or 12 years, and for a period of time I lived on the East Coast, and he was in New York at the time. And so, we could work together early in the morning before the rest of the company started work. I got to know him really well. He's just fabulous.
Yeah. So I see there's a lot of people joining here. And Jess, welcome. It's good to see you on our show. And yes, just confirming everything we're saying, executing any workforce strategy, not backed by people by people data is a bad idea. And so 100% agree. I mean,
irresponsible, tone deaf.
Irresponsible, tone deaf. Yep, just bad. No good. Oh, Jess, no, you're right. I have to. My eyes are. I have to read this.
Self-assessment.
Self-assessment.
It's good to know where you're at and where you want to be. Why? Because what would be the business value of driving that diversity? We don't connect those dots well enough. We just check boxes. How are you helping tell the value story?
Yeah.
It's a question for you, Lexy.
Yeah. I was thinking about that today. There's so many ways to answer this. What was it? Accenture says that shoppers have shifted to retailers with focus on diversity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. So, they're losing out on the opportunity to sell to a diverse consumer base. So that really hits the pocketbook. For an individual company, it's to some degree risk mitigation, but it's just the right thing to do. I'm sure that we could show that our customers that have actively engaged using our solution to improve diversity and inclusion are among the outperformers. That's a total hypothesis, and I will hopefully be able to prove that soon.
Yeah, let's prove it. Yeah, I would agree. It's a very strong
I have the
hypothesis.
opportunity to do the numbers to show that, and there's probably a reason for it. You shine a light on the numbers, and if you kind of unbundle it, it's because you're and you're taking action. You're probably doing things to improve engagement. You're probably, improving your culture, because you've got to pay attention to that. And that engagement drives innovation. It drives people's, pride in their company, their willingness to put out more, and all of that is going to, impact financials. So there's probably a value chain there.
Yeah.
So did I get too geeky there?
Well, what's
great.
that?
Did I get too geeky
No, it's
there?
great.
That's what we're here for.
You can never be too geeky around us. And yes, 100% from Jess. So yes, I want to talk about this report that just came out. And this is this really struck me. And I'll let you kind of let us know what the findings are. But I think it's we need to change this curve. So I want to shine a spotlight on it. This is a forum to do it. We have a lot of people here, and it needs to start with having this tough conversation. So can you let us know what you found with these pay gaps that we're seeing?
Yeah, so the report is on pay of ethnic groups, and inequity is rampant, and the horrible finding is that it will take 78 years for Black employees to achieve pay equity with the current level of pay improvement. And I want to say something here about the data set that we're working with. Our customers are adopters of leading practices. They've adopted people analytics. They're doing the best they can with lots of practices. And if this is the case with them, imagine what it's like in the rest of the world. I mean, and I've done some comparison of our set of customers to others, and they just consistently do better. And this is horrible. And I'm not pointing any fingers at them. It's just the reality of today. And there's so many reasons for this. There's not been opportunities for Black people, for women first. It's maybe easier to talk about that. To have equal opportunities. With women, there's the issue of the manager divide, where they leave the workforce, for a period of time to have children. So they miss out on being advanced to a manager position. So they're not getting the salary commensurate with a manager position. And it's impossible for them to ever make up with that. And the same thing has happened in the past with, people of color. And then, they don't get promoted until later in their careers. So there's just so many reasons for this pay gap to exist. And so, I hope that the effect of this report is that people will pay attention to their own numbers and see what they need to do to create more equity.
Yeah, Lexy, as we talked about earlier, we all need to own this information. I mean, we're all accountable for this, right? I mean, this is who we are. And thanks to you and the Courage of Visier too for publishing this information, because together we have to hold this. This is data, like I said, we have to shine a light on it. And now, what are we going to do?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Sometimes, I think it's easier to have data to shine a light on what's happening than for, squeaky wheels by like me, an older woman, saying, look at that picture of a company. There's, their executive suite. There's not a single woman on it. I can rant against that, but, it's like an individual voice. When you've got data and you've got aggregate data, it's like, this is the truth.
It's real.
Pay attention.
Yeah. I'm going to read a quote in this. If you haven't seen this, we'll post a link to this report. But I'm going to, Lexy, you were quoted. I'm just going to read this because I think it's really powerful. Is this data should be a wake-up call to employees that have publicly pledged to improve their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals in support of movements such as Black Lives Matter. Actions, not words, are what cause real change. And that's such a key part of this. Actions, not words, are what cause real change. The data we've uncovered shows there's a problem, but it's not an unsolvable one. And that, there's hope. Let's be optimistic. It's not that we can change this, we have to change this. So I'm going to be clear with that. So armed with data, organizations can take concrete actions to correct the imbalances in their workplaces and hopefully expedite the path to an equitable society. So, I think that this data is powerful. I think we need to accept it, normalize it, start talking about it, and start acting on it. So I just appreciate you putting this out. What would be your feedback for organizations who read this? What should they do? What should they do with this? Other than first, we're going to be sad but what's the next step?
And I was just going to,
how do they start to?
and just to interject on that a little bit, Dan, before you answer, Lexi. And where does this accountability lie? Because I do think, this is information across, industries, across organizations. I mean, like a few minutes ago, I was saying, like we have to, as a society, we all have to kind of own this. So maybe to picking up on Dan said, obviously organizations need to make changes, policies, procedures, et cetera. I'm sure you'll jump into that. But do we need to be thinking about this more broadly, or how do we think about this more broadly across industry or across countries? And it's probably okay. I'll stop there. Would love to hear your feedback as you're the expert.
Yeah, it's such a huge issue. There's social aspects of it. There's political aspects of it. It's easier for me to kind of stay within the organization because that's where I've done the research. So and do have Paul on because he's got this wonderful framework of all the things that need to be done to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we call this framework the open mind, open book, open heart framework. And it's around, it's around data, it's around analytics and applying it to shine a light on process areas. And it's around having really fearless dialogue, and really starting to talk about this. And the data can really inform that conversation. So that's all great. You asked a question kind of earlier when you were talking, Patrick, about who owns this, and I actually have some data on that to date it is owned by HR. People analytics is owned by HR, certainly among our customers more than it's owned by the IT or is in amongst the enterprise applications. So that's where it is. And I think that's a good place for it. We may see a migration over to ownership at an enterprise level, but for now it needs the attention of the smart people within HR that really are creating talent strategy and know the nitty-gritty of how to improve on diversity, equity, inclusion. I went off on a rant there, didn't I? There was more to your question.
No, I think you got there, and it's that kind of organizational approach. Like, where do we start? And ownership is a big part of it, and then and then what do we do to get to these seemingly intractable challenges? And you also alluded to this too a little bit. And there's organization, HR. Then there's organization ownership, and then there's sort of kind of societal ownership. It's it's like you said, it's politics, it's policies, it's all kinds of things. And
I think there's some personal ownership too. I think about this a lot, being as old as I am, having been in the workforce as long as I am, and I find myself I'm just frosted about the state of lack of equality and equity for women. And if I were Black, I would even be more irate. But that doesn't help. I've got to temper that a little bit and, use my voice a little bit more wisely. And, I can use data and I can report from that. I can also, ask for help. I can ask for a coach, a mentor, get my allies, people like Jess, love her for that. She is such a champion for women. And Quinn Slaughter, who's on this call, I love what she's doing as head of TA in her organization. And I think we each individually also need to kind of pay attention to what matters for us. And we have to, women are better at some things than men are. You guys may be different than most men, but we're really good at creating collaboration. We're really great at creating trust. We're really great at being more empathetic, I think. Now, there's some great men that have all of those traits, but we're really good at that. And we need to use that and, let that shine out. And, just speak wisely.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think that's so insightful, and you're being passionate about these things will drive the right conversations, right? And that allows us to shine lights and really start to speak truth to this,
Yeah.
and have the debates that we've been, unfortunately, for so long. And look, no offense to HR, but a little, we've been a little politically correct, right? We haven't opened up conversations to areas where we need to talk about, like, what defines an individual. Like, why is that such a hard thing for a company to accept? When we talk about the whole person experience, and if being a mother, or being focused in the community, like, these things are important to you and these clearly define you, you should be able to embrace that, and an organization should be able to embrace that, or whatever it is about you that is a part of your DNA. And I think HR needs to loosen up a little bit with that. And I think that's an opportunity. And I think we can start to collect new data there and create new science there around what
Yeah.
drives engagement ultimately, and what drives that connection to organization, and bringing your best to organization. It isn't just liking my manager or having an opportunity to climb the career ladder. And that kind of leads us into the great resignation conversation too. Like people are leaving because there's no link to purpose, flexibility. Companies that haven't set up an environment for an individual to bring their whole person, they're starting to get hit, right? And those companies that actually did the right things during the pandemic and actually braced and started to think about culture 16 months down the road, had a North Star, understood we're eventually going to come back to normal, started to put things in processes, like you said, in place, and people analytics in place.
I love your
There's my rant.
Yeah, no, I love your notion of whole person, and Ian and I are collaborating on something, where we're kind of bringing that notion to bear. A few years ago, one of my other colleagues and I wrote a paper on applying people analytics to support the employee, and we created a value proposition for applying data for the good of the employee. And you look at Maslow's hierarchy, and we want to be actualized. We want to be passionate. I mean, we may not have the liberty to do that all the time, but ultimately we want to give our best, I think. And where was I going on that? If we're not treated as a whole person in the organization, we're just not going to put out.
That's right.
Melissa Arante and I are working on this notion of inclusion experience. We've been doing some work with our customers on employee experience, and we've identified the moments that matter where the organization shows up to give the employee a great experience. Apply that thinking to inclusion experience, and there's all kinds of moments that matter where the organization, its leaders, its culture, its people show up as being inclusive or not, and embracing the whole person aspect. And if you start to look at inclusion in that totality, there's all kinds of ways that you can measure and then improve inclusion, other than just addressing sentiment. I feel included. Sorry, I'm going to go on a rant here.
No, please do.
I no longer care if I feel like I belong or I'm included. I just want to make a difference. I'm 76. I want to make a difference. So that's what we should be measuring. Does inclusion enable its employees to make a difference? So it changes how you look at measuring inclusion, I think.
That's great. And as you were talking about Maslow's hierarchy too, and I was thinking about the earlier part of our conversation about kind of where is responsibility in this, right? And if you think about moving toward, sort of the premise of Maslow's hierarchy is that we, like you said, at some point everyone wants to be self-actualized. We want to get to that point where we feel we're able to bring the most to ourselves in the world. But the challenge is, for different, different parts of our world and a society, it's getting up those first couple of rungs where we can even start to realize that that's something that we can move toward. You know what I mean? So the more that as a society and an organization we're helping people kind of lift their way up through that hierarchy, right? The more that we start to individually as a whole person kind of understand who we are in this world and how we, how we can move toward that self-actualization. So I think that's where so much of this, that's why this is such a challenge, is there's so many different pieces of the puzzle that needs to give a lift. So that as a broader society, we are individual, we're respected, and we're all able to move towards what we want to do and feel like we're, bringing value back to our communities in the world and bringing value back to industry, right? That's the work in the end. And that's what all the stuff we do is about. It's about enabling that.
Yeah, and that's what we should maybe all be as individuals, to enable that for everybody. I'm also kind of ageism is of course an issue. We did a report a number of years ago on ageism in tech, and it's amazing to me that people over 40 are, there's a bias against that. People should be able to work as long as they want, but they need to also, kind of be passionate about what they do and
Exactly.
do their part of the equation. But to think that organizations are, biased against older people, that's just horrid. This resignation wave, one of the things we're seeing is that older people are starting to retire. COVID has kind of shown that there's more to life than work, and we can't afford to lose those older people. It's
right.
Yeah.
We've got to do something about that. And I look at the diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory groups in most companies. They're focused on other aspects of diversity and not yet age. Although some companies are. Some companies really understand we've got to keep the intellectual capital of our older workforce.
Yeah. Well, and also, I think the intellectual capital, but also ultimately mindset is so important, right? Because I believe anybody can sort of adopt a fresh perspective regardless of age, right? It's mindset. And if organizations help connect people more and create a space for conversation, create a space for learning, right? Then age sort of becomes irrelevant. Maybe someone 20 doesn't need as much sleep. Maybe that's it, or maybe they need more sleep because they're drinking too many IPAs. But it doesn't,
No, I think there's a study, Dan,
but we proved that's not the case either.
Yeah,
So.
right. I was going to say, I think there's a study out there, I think sponsored by the Microbrewing Association, that the more beers you drink, the less sleep you need. I think that's what I read.
Maybe I should be a whole beer every day. I'll be a whole person, whole beer.
Yeah. But, hearing the two of you jam on this and, thinking about where we are with people analytics and, thinking where do we go with all of this? The world is changing and so much opportunity, right? We're optimists here. How do we use analytics and data to help enable what we just described? How do we use it to enable, people to have a better sense of self and purpose? How do we use data to allow people to maybe work a little less, but still be valued in organizations? How do we use data to help make connections between, like the way we described it, is that intellectual capital, but then there's a younger workforce that can leverage that. How do we use data to facilitate all that? And if I just to go off on a riff here, and I'm sure if we had Ian, he would be supporting this if he was live with us. That's the next 10 years maybe of people analytics, is getting more creative with it, because we have more computing power and more AI power to really start to enable that, so it can support what has historically been attractive.
Yeah, I've been really interested in watching some of our customers, kind of address an issue like turnover and trying to, reduce turnover, and then experimenting with different interventions and tracking the return on investment on the different interventions. And, that's something I think that could be done with, addressing the, potential that older workers are going to be leaving. Like, what are the things that can be done? Maybe they want to work part-time. Maybe they want to, move to special projects. Maybe they, there's just other things that, might be possible to keep their intellectual capital and their passion and, in their mentoring capability even. And let's look at what is most effective, so you can use analytics for that. One of our customers had addressed turnover, and they started to look at the return on investment of a number of different interventions they took. Like they could improve pay, they could do, they could have their managers, coach their workers better. They could train the retained employees, and actually found that by training retained employees, they got greater sales. That's not an example about ageism necessarily, but the point is that you can use people analytics to look at different actions that you take, so you know what works for your organization.
Yeah. Ian just kind of was confirming with what Pat just said, and we're in a place where to lift human experience through tech, and I 100% agree, Ian. I think we are to a place where we can also actually make sure tech is adding the value that it was meant to add, right? Because tech is sort of is normalizing the ability to dream and drive the human experience more,
It's
right?
just
We don't have
Yeah.
we're not limited by technology as much, so now we can focus on what matters most, and that's people and humanization within the workplace.
Absolutely. Some of the stuff that our advanced organizations are focused on right now is, after COVID, they need to improve productivity, but they need to do it in a humanistic way, and so they're looking at the intersection of, wellness programs and engagement programs, along with, measuring productivity. And, I don't want this to sound like it's all mechanized, but you can apply data to achieve business outcomes and embrace whole people and be empathetic. And it's not just the technology, it's the practices that go along with it. It's all the wonderful, kind of culture related programs that organizations do. The wellness, stuff is great. The engagement stuff is great. The employee experience stuff is great. Inclusion stuff is great. All those things that, are more heart-based. And then you can just see with the data whether they're making an impact.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing we say is long-term success isn't found in being profit-centered, right? It's found in being human-centered, and I think
and you do it because it's the right thing to do. Use people data as Al says.
Exactly. Yeah, and right, and just and right. And like your study is a good example of that. Again, it's just how do we use data to make a difference, because it drives the right kinds of conversations.
So we're about 3 minutes to close. So Lexy, thank you. What a great conversation. We could keep going on and on here. I guess my final, just what's your advice? We didn't get much into the Great Resignation, and obviously there's some challenges organizations are going to be facing if they're not taking this seriously and putting in the appropriate change. Really starting to leverage analytics on, especially your report around the gap, ethnicity and pay gap issues. Where do you think organizations need to start? How do they tomorrow? What's the conversation they start to have to really make sure they are future-proofing themselves, focusing on now, right? That's so important. The world we have to be agile. We have to live today and tomorrow in business, but we also have to start thinking about what do we want to look like? What do we want to feel like as an organization? So how do we balance that coming in off of the worst pandemic, in our history?
To address the resignation wave, just asking the question is the first place to start, and looking at what's happening, doing exit interviews, really understanding, why people are leaving, and then, using that to, create the programs to retain people if that's the right thing to do. And oftentimes it is. I suspect you guys know the answer even better than I do. We're actually looking at that, and stay tuned for a good thought piece, if not product, to come out to address just that. But it's going to be the same kind of thing that we recommend with data. See where you are, benchmark yourself. Start looking to where there's choke points, variations. That enable you to hone in on where the problem really is. Is it a manager? Is it pay? Is it lack of career opportunity? You can look at all those drivers of resignation. And then, you got to talk to the people that are leaving. What's in their heart when they leave? Is it because they had a crappy manager? Is it because they didn't get paid? They didn't get recognition? We haven't talked about that. There's just so many reasons that people leave. And then there's practices and programs that can be applied to improve those areas.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to use the data and listen to your people.
Have the data. Buy people analytics. Buy Vizier.
Yeah. There you go. There's the ending. It was just the long setup for that, and now Ian is smiling. I know.
I'd never be a salesperson. I can't go out and say, buy it. we are the answer to everything for you.
Well, thank you for bringing your speaking of heart and just passion and to the conversation. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
It was just really, it was inspiring chatting with you. And wow, that was a lot for 60 minutes. I feel smarter, and I'm sure the community loved this. So thank you, Pat. Any final words as my older, wiser brother?
I'm not sure about the wiser part, but thank
Definitely
you,
older,
Lexy.
yeah.
Definitely older. Thank you, Lexy. Just really great conversation. And as Dan said, thanks to your commitment and work in this space. We need you. 10 more years.
10 more years. Hashtag. We're gonna start a new hashtag, Lexy. 10 more years.
Can you imagine?
She's thinking about it.
7-year-old in the workforce. It's like,
and
my husband does brain research, and he's a little older than I am, and he's still doing work. It's like, as long as you let us work in the way we want to work, I'll stick around.
There you go.
But when you ask me to do stuff I don't like to do,
yeah, you have the right to say, nope, I'm doing it my way. Well, thank you, and thanks to the awesome community and all the great comments along the way. Have a wonderful Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening. We have a handful of folks from Europe on, I saw. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Lexy.
Well, I wish I could see all of them. Come to HR Tech maybe
soon.
Yeah, Las Vegas.
Yes, well, we'll see you at HR Tech. Yes. All right, 10 more years, Lexy.
See ya.
See ya. Bye-bye.